So welcome to Bunny's Designs. This is a live show, a live stream recorded for ustream.tv and also for YouTube for people to watch at their leisure. I'm working in my Mythomorphia by Kirby Roseanne. And complete contrast to this page, which is the Derwent pastel pencils. This is going to be worked in my little Winsor Newton professional watercolours. So I've added some others. Some of these are my tubes. So I bought extra clean pans and filled them. And I've sprayed them so that I'm just going to have a damp rigger touching and then having a watercolour effect. So again, there's only a little pot for cleaning your water. Less things to spill. So I'll zoom in and then we can start on this page. So I'll just shut this for a second so I don't make everybody sick. And we can see what I'm doing. And then I'll put it in focus. So thanks for joining me this quite bright day outside. I don't normally see daylight, so I'll zoom right in and then you can see what I'm doing. Just have to refocus. And I'm working on this particular brush today, which is a 30, but it's not an ordinary rigger. I would probably say that's a 10-0, but it's a synthetic one, and it's for modelling. I bought it as a model show. So I'm going to work in the top corner, and I usually put a spare piece of paper under the corner. So if I get to here, instead of kind of flicking off the edge of the paper and damaging colouring the others, if you put a sheet of photocopy paper on here, you've got a nicer edge to finish off with. So you've just got that little bit more control. Now I'm just going to have to move this so it's comfortable for me. So apologies for this. Otherwise I get in a mess. Oh, spilt the water, but there's only a tablespoon, so that's fine. I'm such a clumsy girl. So that's why I like working with a tablespoon of water, because if you spill, it's not the end of the world. So I've got I work with riggers in threes. So in this set I've got a number 3, I've got a number 1, and I've got a 3-0. But it makes, you want kind of a chunky one, a medium sized, and a fine. And then I love my little fine Daler Rowney 10-0 liner. I find that really, really good. But I think I'll be working with a smaller brush today, I think. Yep, I'm going to be working with a tiny brush because these are small spaces. So you have to look at your spaces and decide what things are. So I'm dunking into a pot of water, an ink pot of water, because this can't spill over, it was the other one, and then twisting it on a baby wipe to a point that's just damp enough to pick up colour and manoeuvre it. Oh, sorry, Suzanne. Well, I hadn't slept for a few nights, so I did actually take my sleeping pills last night, and so of course this morning it was difficult to wake up, and that's why I don't really like taking them, because hubby wants me to jump out of bed first thing in the morning, and it's like doesn't work that way with pills. So sorry you're having a bad night. Just going to try and get to the edge there so we can have a bit of a play. And it's got to be a little bit comfortable for me. So again, I'm putting my hand here, and I've got my paint on this side because I can't move my elbow very well. So I would normally say if you're left-handed, you want your water and your paints and your paintbrushes on the left and your cup of tea or whatever on the right and your water pot on the left. If you're right-handed, you want your palette and your water and your brushes on your right, because you don't want to be crossing your work. Two reasons: one is paint can drop off and spoil it, and the other one, it's just easier, it's less work and it's quicker. The only reason I have this here is so that I can stand here and dunk and catch colour, because my shoulder won't move too far. So that's the only reason I do it that way around. Normally I would say always have everything on the side that you are left-handed or right-handed. This is why I wanted those in that palette, because I can get it near, but this, because it has a double flap on it, you can't get it too near, and if you put it underneath, I don't think it's going to go flat. I might do a little bit. So basically what I've done is this. So I'm here and I'm just going across for colour. And apologise about the nails, but my daughter didn't manage to do my hands today, so apologies for that. My fingernails are not brilliant. So I'm not pressing on very, so I can just about manage to get away with that, I think. I might put a book underneath it, actually. Thinking about it, I'm going to put a colour book underneath just to make it a little bit more stable. Oopsie. Give it a bit of stability. That's better. So when I push on it now, I'm not going to knock the tin down. So I've got a piece of clean kitchen paper that I put on the work, so you're not making any marks. Quick slurp of tea. Yes, Suzanne, definitely not. I don't know how I managed to feed the bunnies, because she brings the box in. She brings the bunny in, then she brings the box in, then we put Mummy in the box. So Mummy sits there, and we think she might be alright with them, but it's just, in case everybody in YouTube land, we've got some baby bunnies. So Alfie's had his nose pushed out. Sorry, Suzanne. Alfie's had his nose pushed out. Although he was sitting earlier. So these are the little wrinklies this morning. Moving about. And then this one in a minute should jump up and decide he wants to be, whoopsie. They're definitely starting to move about. Sorry about the light. And they have huge ears, bless them. So they have a bit of a moment where they're moving about. So he's fast asleep by my feet. So I'm going to start to paint now. Sorry about that, but we have to have a little bunny cam. So I hope the volume's alright. So I'm dunking in there, paintbrush, damp brush, and my problem is I take a long time to find out what colours I want. But I think there's some quite nice oranges. So I'm just barely touching a bit of colour. And again, have a bit of a practice first. So once you do a practice page, you get used to how much colour you've got to manipulate it to like a watercolour effect. So you want a dunk, a touch, oops, and again you see you've just got to manipulate that. Maybe I need a bit more practice, because I want some very pale colours from here. And that's a lovely bluebell colour. I kind of like gamboge. Gamboge is gorgeous. I'm just going to spray them again. Yes, they all have, all the ears are growing quite nicely, but we're not sure how much, we're not sure what happened and when she got pregnant, because we don't know if she arrived pregnant or one of our little boys, but she was booked in this week to be spayed, but obviously we can't do that for a few weeks now. So I'm just going to touch that gamboge, which is a deep, or it's a tangerine colour. If you get a tangerine, oops, it's a tangerine colour. So it's not quite an orange. It's what we call a satsuma colour. Yes, Alfie, behave yourself. Be a good boy. So I think I like these to be a bit of an orangey colour though. So I'm actually going. I think this is cad orange. And again, I think I've got a bit too much on there, but we'll just have, yeah, a bit too much. But that's a really nice colour, that. So if I don't put as much as that on, that's going to be about what I want. So literally just a little tiny touch, and then and you've got to be comfortable, so you want to manipulate that colour out. So you have a really nice watercolour effect. And every time you dunk slightly differently, so each petal is going to be slightly different. And if you've done a watercopy first, a practice, then you get used to it, so you know how the brush is going to react, how wet to have it. So you can build different petals, a bigger, but you might still want the watercolour effect. So you get a really nice pretty watercolour effect without any. Oh yes, Suzanne says she loves gamboge as well. Yep, it's a really nice. If you want to go back in again, you can put a little bit more touch back in. But sometimes you don't really want to lose that nice highlight. You've got to be a bit careful, because you could lose that highlight. And this isn't gamboge. I think this is cad orange. I'm guessing this is cadmium orange. And we just keep manipulating that up there. So you can do the whole flower at once, or you can do a little bit. And I say just a touch in the bottom there. And you can use different strokes and different techniques. Depending on what kind of effect you want. Excuse me. So again, a clean brush, twisted on a baby wipe so it's barely damp, because you want that colour to be manipulated. You want that colour to be manipulated round. Now this might not do it actually. You seem to have a rogue piece of fluff on the end of there. But the hydras are beautiful because they're very vibrant. So you can get as subtle or as bright highlight as you want. And sometimes to get a different one is quite nice as well. So you can have a paler flower, and you can, because you're working so dry, you're just barely damp, you can get away with one or two coats, whereas if this was wet and it wasn't just a damp rigger, your paper would rub. So you can only do it this way, but again they're dry. I love that fact that you're not using a lot of water. So, and again, I like this way of working. It's you can do this on a cushion tray. You don't need a lot of space. All your paints, you don't have to get opening tubes up, which isn't really an option for me with my hands. So all the colours are there, and when I get them in my pan, I'll have quite a few colours. So I don't have to mix if I don't want to, because sometimes my hands are so bad I can't really do that. So again, that's something that I like doing. I think that's a different flower. That one's the same. Now normally you'd go to a smaller brush for a smaller flower, but this is quite small. I think that's supposed to be green actually, I'm not quite sure, but and you just keep building it up until you have some nice watercolour effects. So I think that's the daisy, but then that's a pink rose, I think. So I think this is the flower. So again, we can have some fun with this. We can do this in the centre, and as we pull it out, if I haven't got too much on, probably a bit too much on there. Because I sprayed them, I'm getting quite a lot, but you should get a little bit of a watercolour effect. It is a tiny space though, this. So thanks for joining me, everybody. I hope you're all having a pleasant morning, apart from people trying to get to sleep. You obviously want to be nodding off, not waking up. So again, it's a very nice, peaceful way to work. And I love the fact that you don't need a hairdryer or a heat gun in order to get things dry, because waving a heat gun around would... I've just bought a new one, first time I've ever had one, and I can't use it, so I like the fact that you don't actually need one. Things just kind of dry, but you're not stuck. You're not thinking, oh, I can't carry on, I've got to move to a different place because my page is wet, and it's so dry that you don't get any crinkling. So from a very strong cadmium orange, I've got some very pale colours. Oh, thank you, Kate. Yes, that it's a wonderful way of working. It took a long time for me to develop it, 2 years to develop it, and it all came from my little colour book, my little book of watercolours, which has disappeared. I think it's in my bag that I've packed. It's in my art bag. But basically, it was designed for the disabled or for travelling. And I think it's about 2 years when I made this little book. And that's how it works. It's with my little book of watercolours. So basically, you just touch colour with a damp rigger and go. And I've got a few hundred colours in here, which is a few thousand shades. So I love my little colour book. And with a damp rigger you can get some wonderful watercolour effects, but your page is lovely and flat and it's dried. It doesn't take long. If it's not drying very quickly, then your paintbrush is too wet. I mean, when I run my finger across there's hardly anything showing, and that's what you want, just damp, barely damp. That's why if you can do it on a photocopy paper, you can do it in, it's a technique I use for Bible colouring in as well. So that brush is damp, and it actually works the opposite way to the chameleon pens. Chameleon pens have alcohol in here. Sorry, they have colour in here in the tube, and you put alcohol in the nib, and it gets a certain colour, and it gets darker and darker and darker until it returns to its original colour. But on a rigger, what happens is you've got a touch of colour, so it's the darker, 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 and then you're manipulating all that dampness to create a watercolour. And the riggers are used that way because when they used to do long strokes, they needed long, fine strokes. And if you use an ordinary paintbrush and you touch, the water will just come out straight away. This holds whatever's in here, it holds it. If it's colour, you can do long, thin lines. So they're used for the rigging on tall ships when they were painting them, the old masters. So I love these riggers, and again, just this touch. And it's easy on your hands as well. You know, if you can just barely touch this, and what happens is when you're colouring in, all the pressure on your hands is in the bouncy brush. So it's not like tapping like this and it's going to hurt your thumbs, because I can't hold anything with my thumbs. So it's very, very easy on the hands. You can colour like this for hours because it's not going to hurt your hands, because all that stress is taken out of the bouncy brush. And this being professional watercolours, you can manoeuvre it quite nicely. And you just pick, if it's a big space, you use a bigger rigger. Ugh, can't say that this morning. If it's a smaller space, then swap to a smaller rigger. The idea is to keep the page fairly dry. So there's a lot of my videos, I call it watercolouring. And it's watercolouring but not with a lot of water. Sorry, or with less water. But if you do a photocopy page, you practice first. Once you've done the whole book, the whole page, then you can be quite proficient in it. And I say, all I'm doing is touching. In fact, I can get it out. If I can get it out, I'll get it out. See if I can get that orange out now. So it's quite wet and it's got like a little puddle. So basically all I'm doing is dunking the brush, twisting it on a baby wipe, touching that colour like that, and then away we go. And depending on how strong I want it, depending on where I touch it. And the colours go a long way, and you're not wasting any, you're not making a palette and then pushing it down the sink. So as a tight Yorkshire lass, I quite like that. And then when you feel that your brush is getting a little bit dry, you can do it again, but I just want that under there to be darker. And that's all I'm doing. It's very easy, very quiet, peaceful little way of working. So again, I'll try and keep that on the end. And I'm doing that one. So I just don't brush, then just dunk and push the colour around. I need to dunk again. And when you put your water in your pot, your brush and your water, it's completely clear. So when you've finished, you've got clear water. So you know that every scrap of watercolour is on the page. We can do that one a little bit darker under there. And there does seem to be a different flower there. I've got a bud there as well. So I like working from dry paint better for this. That's why the little book works quite well, because you don't get a better watercolour effect as perhaps you would. When it's dry. So just got a couple to do at the top. And again, I'm just dunking and then away we go. So if you do 2 or 3 petals, by the time you go back to the middle, it's changed slightly. So you can do it that way if you want. I'm pretty sure that's going to be a different colour, that rose. There's 2 more here that I want to do. So if you've got any questions, pop them in caps. Anybody watching at YouTube, if you leave a comment, is there anything you want to see? Let me know if you want to know where all the videos are. I do have, I think I've got 310 videos out now, and I started about a year ago. Um, but if there's any particular thing, I've got quite a lot of watercolours. The only thing I can't use anymore is my, and I did have a request for it, is my oil pastels. And just for the moment, I can't use the oil pastels. My hands are too bad. I can only just do this and Derwent pencils. So I'm trying to keep with um, my watercolours, but finding it a bit difficult. So again, I think that's a different flower. I think that's a different flower, but these should be the same here. I mean, you don't have to do them all colour. You know, it's a Kirby Roseanne. You can do whatever you want, but I quite like sometimes to keep them the same colour. But you can use this technique if you're out sketching, anywhere where you don't want to use a lot of water. I do this in hospital quite a lot when I'm waiting for appointments. And you can shut the book almost immediately and it won't smudge because it's not wet. So this isn't working quite as well as if this was dry. You've got more colour because it's just not working as well. But I'm quite enjoying it. It's fine. Oh, thanks, Suzanne. Well, the reason the Digi's not there, I was going to do Digi Thursdays, is I think eventually it'll all be Digi. I think it may all be Digi. Because my hands are not working. So, so if you did this with the dry, you'd get a lot more of a watercolour effect. This isn't really a good watercolour effect, this, because I sprayed them wet. It was an experiment. Why is it the second I start to stream the phone rings? It's going to have to just ring. Sorry about the phone. But by the time I've jumped up and got it, it had stopped anyway, so sorry about that. So I don't really like working this way. I like to work dry, really, because you get a nice watercolour effect. So I won't spray them again because I don't like it. You haven't got as much control on your paintbrush. But the idea is it's a colour book and you're not to get stressed about it. If you make a boo-boo, you've just made a boo-boo. It's a colour book. So thanks for joining me, guys. I hope Puppy's feeling a bit better. Oh, is everybody okay? I think sometimes... Oh no, Suzanne, I'm using my little pot here. My little professional pan set of Winsor Newton Cad Red Pale. Oh, so it isn't cadmium orange, it's Cad Red Pale. But I would call that Cad Orange, but they don't. Have I done something? Let me have a look. Is everybody okay in chat? Can everybody else hear me? Are we still with us? Try that, case, see if that works. Ustream sometimes keeps having a few moments. It was very bad a couple of weeks ago, but it seems to be slightly better now. So I'm working, I pulled the little pan out. So I'm just using a damp brush and just touching, very gently, just touching a tiny amount of colour. And that was far too much colour, so I'm going to put that in the bottom of all these, because that'll just be flat colour. It'll never be anything else. So if you decide to wet the brush, that's what you get. Wet the paints. You don't get as much control, so you can't get these lovely little highlights. And your brush is dry and you've still got paint on the end. Yes, Kay. I'll come out and I'll show you my little book of watercolours, and then you can also see what I've been doing on there. Then, give me 2 seconds. And it's fairly fast, is this as well? I really like the fact it's quite fast. So that's what I'm working in at the moment. My little book of watercolours. My little watercolour set, sorry. And Cat Art have them for about £40 now, and I think they're 100 and some, so it's a good price. Again, that's the last one I did, all dry. So in an emergency, you can shut your book. So this is my little book of watercolours, and it's basically a photo album. This one's particular one's from Paper Chase, but originally I used the pound shop ones like this and cut them up. Oh, I bought a little bit better than this one, But what you do is you can pull this out and stick it into here. So this is a paper chase. I did have another one in front of me, but I think I've popped it somewhere. Let me have a look. And then I cut some plastic from packaging. I'm going to put that one there. So in here, these are these pans, these professional watercolours, and there's some cotton that I've cut the bottom off a couple of millimetres. So you've got to be a bit careful, but if you get a new set, they come out quite easy. Just looking for that little pan. Must have popped it in here. And I'm actually going to do that. So this comes out, this is your colour, this is your pan. And you get a blade, and you can hold it with tweezers and then cut about 2 millimetres off the back. And then when you put it back in the pan, it sits just a bit shallower. But that gives you 2 millimetres of colour to take out with you. This is on bit thicker paper. This I'm going to put mine on this postcard, but I don't put any other colours on the postcard. I only put that because I'm not going to touch the watercolour card. If you touch the card, it'll go soggy. The watercolours will sink in, and we want the colours to sit on top. And this is tubed that I've squirted out. So I'm going to make another one with all my professional watercolours squirted into a tube, and they'll take a few days to dry, but then they'll dry. I just took them in with ordinary Copydex, and then as long as you make sure that this is clean and dry, this is your palette if you want one, or you can work like I'm working, just straight from colour. You've got to make sure that that's clean and dry because it's going to touch this colour here. The others don't matter so much because this can be wet. These can be wet and you can touch it, and that, you see, that one's had a bit of colour on it. But as long as it's this colour on here, you can't use this as a palette unless you clean and dry it because it will contaminate your other side. So I made this a couple of years ago. I've got my 40 odd Hydrus, and there's a colour swatch. Sorry, not Hydrus, Peerless. I've got there's my there's Caran d'Ache and there's Derwent colours, pencils, metallics, 72 Derwent watercolours, and this is all pure colour here. So if you've got 72 colours, if you've got that instead of 72 pencils, it's a couple of millimetres, and that means that you're leaving the pencils at home, but you've got all this colour. So if you say there's 10 scales and shades of colour here, that's 720 colours. The Derwent Inktense, 72, 720 colours. Shades, rather, I should say. Then there's some watercolour pencils. There's Graphitint from Derwent. There's Prismalo. They have a little sign that says on the paintbrush on the pencil. That means it's watercolour. It goes in here. Caran d'Ache Neocolor 2s. They're all in here, and I just put greaseproof paper between. These are my Derwent metallics and my Caran d'Ache metallics, and the only two are the same. And they're very slightly out. That's a warmer grey, silver grey than that one. So I got 12 different colours from there. This is the Faber-Castell crayons, watercolour crayon sticks. Then I've got my Inktense blocks, and I've got some pastels. They're a bit messy, but there is colour there. My professional Winsor & Newton gouache, my 36 Gansai Tambi watercolours, they're all in there. And then I've got the Hydrus drops, and they look a bit messy, but they're in there. And then there's the some more gouache there. So I've got hundreds, thousands of colours in here, and this is my little book. So if you did sketches, you could have that, and you've got a suitcase full of colours there. So I'm trying to get Derwent to bring it out because Derwent have the capacity of at least 1,000 colours because they've got the art bars. So I'm going to put the art bars in here. So if you get the art bars, the Derwent watercolours, the Graphitint, the Inktense pencils, the metallics, and then the pastels, the Derwent pastel pencils, they could have 1,000 colours in here, 1,000 swatches, and that's 10,000 shades. And I call that a fantastic 21st century watercolour travel set. 10,000 colours, all within the touch of a damp brush. So I'm hoping Derwent will take it on board, because they could sell their little palettes as kind of and postage would be good because it's only this thin, but they could sell, if they had like a clippy binder, they could sell a set of watercolour pencils to see if people like them as well, so they'd also work as a sampler. And obviously be a bit neater. This is my prototype, but it's held up really well. It did fall to bits, and there's a video called Revamping It. I'll show you how I put colours in. So you've got everything in here. This would fill a suitcase. You'd have to have a very big, heavy suitcase to get all these in. So if you're poorly, you just flick. And the beauty of mine is it's lasted a lot longer because I flick and I use a yellow for a rose colour from my Peerless, and then I'll go to Graphitint and use a green for the leaf. And then I might flick to Gansai Tambi watercolour for a bit of sky. So I flick between. Now, they've copied me, have Gansai Tambi watercolours, and they've made puddles of colour as a travel set, because I love the Gansai Tambi watercolours, but I can't really pick up this thing every 5 minutes. I can't even get it out of the drawer. The pans seem to be, they're gorgeous, but the pans fall out for me. And if you say there's a little circle missing out of each one in the middle, and that's how I've used them to make my puddles of water. But they're very vibrant and they're professional. And one of the videos, it's not very good, it's a very early one, is how I put these Gansai Tambi watercolours in here. And if you normally do a colour swatch, I have a big brush handy, you kind of mix the colour and then you swish the brush out in your pot, your water pot. I didn't. I used the dry brush after I'd finished, and every time it got dry I reconstituted it with a drop of water, just the tip, and I coloured 30 pages, colour pages in with 36 Gansai Tambi colours. So all that 30 pages would have gone down the sink. So instead of washing the brush out in between each swatch, I just filled colour pages with it. Colour pages that I didn't like, just as an experiment, and I got 30 pages. So every time you wash your brush out in your pot, your watercolours are going down this pan. And as a tight Yorkshire lass, I don't like that. So this is the colour of my water now. And I've been working with professional watercolours. So have you got any questions? Well, I can't. I would rather give it to Derwent. I want to put Derwent back on the market. Yeah, it is. I'm a bit obsessed about my little book. Then I forgot about it when my hands were bad. But I'm hoping Derwent. We do model shows in Derwent, so I keep emailing them. They don't email me back, so they must think I'm just a crackers, crazy old woman. But again, the hydrus are in there, so it's quite good. But it actually belongs to Derwent. In the 80s, there's a gentleman called David Cook, a wildlife artist. I think he lives in America now. And he scribbled on the back of his sketchbook squares of Derwent watercolour pencil. But they've obviously forgotten that. There'll be nobody alive, probably, that remembers that. So if they don't, I was thinking about buying sets of colours and making my own, because the postage would be really good. Oopsie, Alfie's gone for his moan. So again, I love the fact we've got a little bit of a watercolour effect going and no water. Your pages are flat. So I really like that idea. So on that note, that's what we've been working with. And again, I've used a little piece of kitchen roll. So you can just kind of do this and fill out. I normally pick out all the flowers that are the same. So there's actually quite a few on this one that are the same. That one's a different flower. And these are different, I think. And then you pick out a nice green to go with them, and I do all the leaves. That's how I normally work with these. Has anybody else got any questions? So that's the end of part 1 of our Imagimorphia. Sorry, it's not Imagimorphia, I apologise. Mythomorphia. I think that's it looks like a bunny. A hare? Yes, it's a hare, isn't it, I think. But he's morphed into a stag. So he's half bunny, half stag. So that's the end of part 1 of watercolouring in my Mythomorphia bunny page. Thank you for watching.